Welcome everybody to today's webinar with Anne Whatley-Dale on workers' wellness and retention, facilitated by the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. My name is Lauren Kerrison. I'll be introducing Anne. So Anne Whatley-Dale is the founder and driving force behind livepresent. She has had decade-long focus on wellness and communication, working with small and medium-sized businesses, government and large multinationals. And her passion is people. From starting a health consulting business in Perth, Anne's work evolved into corporate training and coaching in selling services, communication, and managing challenges amongst customers and situations, plus speaking on a range of topics. Anne firmly believes we all have a shot at being the best we can be and live the best life for as long as possible. Through Live Present and her programs, she shows how to make the link between emotions and communications and wellness work for you to achieve success and wellness in life and work. Anne's work and life have seen her life in most capitals and come back full circle to Perth. When not working, you'll probably find her on a track near Perth Swan River or Hobart Derwent, training for her next sporting adventure. I'll now hand over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. It's great that you can join us today. Today, we're talking about workers' wellness and retention. And the things that we're going to be covering are why healthy conversations matter to your team and customers, some keys for engaging your team for improved staff and customer retention, and building and supporting and reinforcing a customer-focused culture that's based on communication and wellness. So my first question for you today is, what's your main reason for attending today's webinar? And if you take a moment and just make a note of that for yourself, it's just for you, just to refocus you on why you've actually decided to register or look at the presentation. So while we're doing that, and before we start, I also wanted to just go through a few main points, some of the fundamentals, I guess. First and foremost, communication and wellness are inextricably linked. I've had lots of times during doing my work where people have said you need to separate the two. And for me, it's an impossibility, because the reality is from how we respond and react in various different situations, and influences everything that we're doing. So we'll come to that during the presentation. The second point is that workplaces, teams, and people become healthy through a multidimensional approach. And that's, again, how communication and wellness are inextricably linked. This approach, the multidimensional approach that I follow, recognises the 1 + 1 = 3 formula, where the outcomes mean that communication and wellness have been addressed and nurtured effectively, both personally and in the workplace. And last but not least here, relationships between yourself or your team and internal customers are as important as those with external customers. They're just different. So, for example, everyone that you work with, your work colleagues, are of course internal customers, and the external customers or clients are the people that work with or seek the support or services from your business or organisation. The relationships are just different in that if you are speaking with a colleague and a customer or client makes contact, then it would be expected that you focus on the customer or client and come back to your colleague, and vice versa. So let's get started. What is a healthy conversation, and why are healthy conversations important? Well, they're important because healthy conversations and good communication happen from the outside in and the inside out. So what that means is that what we're saying impacts how we feel about ourselves, how we do our job, how we communicate, and how we feel about ourselves and how we're feeling about the day or the meeting or the communication we're about to have, contact, is affected by how we are in ourselves. So we affect what we're saying by how we feel, and what gets said or the situation we're in can affect how we feel backwards and forwards. So it's important to know what we're going to say and how we're going to say it. It's also important to understand how emotions and our emotional life and our emotional health affect how we show up. So, you know, for example, a good one is you wake up in the morning, you feel like you're having a bad day and everything goes wrong, versus the day where you wake up feeling on top of things and everything seems to go right. So the other thing that's to do with all of this that underpins it is all of this starts with feeling in charge. So healthy conversations start by being able to feel in charge of what you're going to say, in charge of the situation that you're in. So really what I wrap this into is an expression, who we are and how we are impacts and influences what we do and how we do it. So who we are and how we're feeling is always going to impact how we go into a conversation, how we go into a meeting, how we interact with anyone in our life at work or outside of it. So how do we get to feel in charge? Well, this probably looks like a bit of a complex diagram for what we're doing today. However, it's important because the key elements of it are that this cycle, which I call the excitement cycle, moves us through the stages that we go through in a conversation, in a relationship, in anything that we're doing in life, in our job. So when we're on the left-hand side, which is on this side here, where we've got excitement and reality. So the excitement of something new, of going into a conversation or starting a job, for example. We then come into the reality of what that conversation, that situation, or that job is all about. When we're here, we're able to take responsibility and feel in charge. When we get to a point where we start making excuses or blaming someone or something because something's not going right, then we're sitting on the side where we are feeling controlled and we are dumping responsibility. So if we want to feel in charge of what's happening in a conversation, in our job, or in life, we need to focus on staying away from excuses and blame. I'll come back to what happens with conflict here as we're looking at challenging conversations. The main point here is that when we're feeling in charge, and I'm saying feeling in charge, not feeling in control, because it's virtually impossible to feel in control. There are too many variables for us to feel in control about everything. When we're on this side, we are able to confront a situation that needs to be addressed, which can clear the air and keep us feeling in charge of things. That's very different than letting a situation escalate into some level of conflict. So I'll come back to that and we can cover that in questions if that's not clear to anybody when we get to the end. Okay, so communication. So 3 of the fundamental points of communication that we want to address is being able to make sure that we're listening and hearing, that we take care of whether we are responding or reacting. So responding can be thought of as thinking before we act, and reacting can be thought of as acting before we think. So when we respond, we tend to have a considered answer, whereas when we react, we're shooting from the hip. And of course, communication is also about verbal and non-verbal communication. So it's not only the words that we say, it's how we say them. It can be our tone of voice. It can be when we're face-to-face or online. It can be whether we've got eye contact. So there's a whole lot of non-verbals. How close we're standing to someone can come into these things as well. Tone of voice, though, and where we place our inflections, including the look on our face as well as the non-verbal, can be really important for the meaning that we're conveying to someone else. And when we bring it all together, we can look at something like this sentence, I did not say he stole the watch, and it has more than one meaning. And let me show you how it has more than one meaning. So it depends on where we put the emphasis. I did not say he stole the watch, which of course means I didn't say it. I did not say he stole the watch. I might not have said it. I might have implied it. I did not say, which again is I did not say it directly. I might have implied it. I did not say he stole the watch. So not that person, maybe someone else did, and so on. So as you bring that together, I hope that's a very quick example of how easily someone can misinterpret what we're saying, and the conversation can go down a track into being very unhealthy, maybe even result in conflict, purely because of where we've put the emphasis and how the non-verbal body language has come together in a statement. So what does that mean as far as communication goes? Well, there's another element to it, which is whether we're focused on what I want, which is me-based communication, or whether I'm focused on what you want, which is you-based. And particularly when you're on the telephone, think about this in terms of you've picked up the phone, you want to make the conversation really quick. So what you do is you say, "Hi, it's Anne, I'm ringing about." And what happens when we do that is we've gone into the middle of the conversation here. So when we go straight into what the conversation is about, we've gone straight to what in very general terms is called needs. On the other hand, if you start the conversation by saying something like, "How are you?" we've come over to this point where we've gone into the greeting first. Now, what difference does that make? Well, it means that what we've done when we put the other person's needs first by asking how they are is we've taken the focus off the reason for why we're calling or we're having the conversation face to face, and we've put it directly onto that person. So whatever the conversation is going to be about, whether it's an easy one, a challenging one, something that is resolving an important issue, or maybe something where you want agreement, it's about being able to relate to the person first and then have the conversation. So it's a bit more than just being courteous. It's actually about being respectful as well. And it's saying, you know, I realize that we're two people here. I've got mutual respect for you. Let's get into our conversation. And the same applies in written conversation like emails as well. So if you've ever had a conversation where you've got off the phone feeling like you didn't really connect with someone, if you've left a meeting thinking, gee, that felt really abrupt, or if you've sent an email and got a response back, which feels really abrupt as well, then often it's because we've gone down this track of not really focusing on the person first, the other person first, instead of doing what we need to do here. So a simple question that changes that is something like, how are you? How's your day going? Hi, are you having a good day? And a good thing to trial with that is, even if you're ringing a call center or an office and you're speaking to someone on reception, being able to just take a moment and say, hi, how are you? Without taking up a lot of time, you'll often notice that the other person is not only surprised that you've asked how they are, that if that's the case, then it will also often soften the next and engage the other person more in talking to you because they see that you're caring about them. So that's that question there, which isn't on the slide, is something like, how are you? Okay, so let's leave communication for a moment and let's go into wellness and wellbeing. This is my wellness and wellbeing barometer, which was developed over a few years and really started out with everything in this diagram looking like it had an equal level of importance. And as I was looking at that, I realized that really at the core of wellness is our emotional health and fitness, how we play our roles in life, and also financial wellness. So if we think first of all about emotional health lies at the heart of wellness and how we communicate, because we have so many different emotions and the way that we express them is really, really important for who we are, and it's important for the communication that we have with other people, and it relies on having a good emotional vocabulary. So a good emotional vocabulary means that we're able to express how we're feeling and be able to get that message across to other people. Now, I know, you know, we've had a lot of time, and still in a lot of cases, you know, emotions are a bit taboo, and you know, you don't want to be emotional. And certainly as a woman in business, and I had a big niche in the automotive industry for a long time, which was an incredibly male-dominated industry. There are many times through my career where I've been told that I'm too emotional, and I used to find that quite grating and frustrating, and look at how I needed to change that because it wasn't acceptable. And then I realized that not only is that who I am, of course emotions are acceptable because they are a big part of who we are. And when we're unable to express ourselves and be aware of our emotions, and of course, you know, what I'm not saying here is it's also about expressing emotions appropriately for various situations, etc. I'm not saying just you know, be totally emotional in every situation. I'm saying acknowledge your emotions, know what they are, and work out how to work with them and how to express them. Because all of our emotions affect our self-talk, our work talk, and our life talk. So our self-talk, of course, is what we're saying to ourselves, which influences how we show up, it influences how we work, it influences everything. And of course, work talk is the conversations that we're having at work or around work or in a work environment, which are affected by our self-talk and affect our self-talk as well. And then, of course, we've got life talk, the talk that we have in our social situations, in our personal relationships with our families, and all of them influence each other and are influenced by each other as well. So our emotions really sit at the core of everything and are affected by everything that happens to us in our life as well. So it's a two-way focus from the inside and outside of that barometer circle. When we think about ourselves and our roles, what roles do we have and where are they? If we're working in an office or in a business or in a job, then we have those roles. If we're working from home, which so many of us do, or we have roles which are outside of the workplace, they are the roles that we play at home. Think of all of the things that you do in life, and you'll realize that there are way more roles than you probably think of immediately that you play. That can also be not only social roles, but family roles, as you know, a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a child, a sibling, etc. So the key to showing up and being present in any role is being engaged. And I call engagement, or I define engagement as the energy to be present. When we're engaged, it's that, you know, when we're in that space where time is irrelevant. We're just doing what we're doing. We're enjoying it. We feel so happy to be doing what we're doing, and we generally do a much better job, or are much more fun to be around, or much better to be around, because we're fully in that present moment doing what we're doing. A good example of what happens when we're disengaged is when we're, say, with our families or friends, and we're thinking about work. And often people will be able to pick on that instantly and just say, look, where are you? You know, you're physically here and you're emotionally absent, or you're just not engaged in this situation. Excuse me. And it's really important for anything that you're doing to be able to be engaged in that moment, because not only do we do a better job, we're also likely to be able to be better for the people around us, and also it impacts our ability to be safe and well as well. So on that note, you know, safety really does start from before we wake up and ends after we go to sleep. So being engaged and being able to be present in what we're doing is always going to be supporting us in being able to drive safely, engage when we're driving, for example. You know, whatever it is that we're doing, being able to make sure that we're engaged and we're fully present will help us to do a better job, enjoy ourselves more, and be safe. So financial wellness sits within this inner core as well, because first and foremost, it's not about the zeros. It's not about how much money you have. It's about having enough for what you want to be able to do and taking some pressure off, because money stress is one of the biggest stresses in our lives. And I think at the moment, particularly with the economy the way that it is, it's one of the things that is really front of mind so often. And certainly the media loves to remind us about the money stress that we're under, whether it's to do with our housing, the food that we're attempting to buy, anything else that we need to have to be able to sustain and live our lives. So money stress influences our self-worth and our self-talk. If there's a lot of money pressure on someone, it doesn't matter what environment they're in, whether you have a job outside of the home or work inside of the home, then that self-worth and self-talk can be fully influenced by, how am I going to pay that next bill? Imagine and you may have had this experience, you've gone into a meeting that's really important for work, or it's even a meeting that's important for your family or your life, and you've just had a phone call about a bill that you either had forgotten about or that is seriously overdue and you don't know how to pay it. If the impact that can have on the things that you're doing in your day can be quite challenging to deal with. It can influence customer conversations and it can influence workplace conversations. Another way that customer conversations can be influenced by our own money wellness is if you're in a role that involves negotiating or selling, then it can influence your perception of somebody else's ability to pay for the services that you are selling or the consulting that is being negotiated on behalf of the business, or even the product. So workplace conversations, of course, can also be affected, because when our self-worth is diminished, or when our self-talk is really not very positive or supportive of ourselves, then going into a meeting with a peer or with one of your team leaders or managers can mean that you feel very on the back foot. So financial wellness isn't about the dollars, and in this context, it's very much about how it affects us as we go about our conversations and go about our work. So the other life areas in the barometer, they ebb and flow. They have an impact from the outside to the inside. So how we are, how our physical health is, our what we're doing socially, etc. All of those areas on the outside will affect us flowing back through our financial wellness, our self and our roles and our emotions, and vice versa. So it's not really saying that all of these areas are disconnected. It's just saying that they have a different relationship to each other. So moving on from there, I've got 3 questions for you as a group. And if you'd like to put, these are yes/no questions. So if you'd like to put yes or no in the chat, Lauren will collate the answers and we'll come back to them shortly. So the first question is, so thinking about recent conversations that you've had, number 1, have you left any important conversations feeling annoyed with yourself for not saying what you needed to because you double-guessed yourself or lost your nerve? And what I mean by that is you've gone into a conversation saying, yes, this is what I need to say, and then you haven't done it. Number 2, have you left any conversations feeling misunderstood? So, for example, you thought you were really clear about what you said, and you just realized that that the other person either misinterpreted what you were saying or they just looked confused. And number 3, have you left any conversations feeling as if you haven't been heard or that you were invisible? So you might have said something and that it either looks like it went over someone's head or it just wasn't acknowledged at all. So yes or no answers, put them in the chat and we'll go from there.
Got a couple responses and all of them are yes so far to all the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, more yeses for 1, 2 and 3.
Okay. All right. Well, so it's overwhelmingly yes.
Oh yes, 100%
Okay.
yeses. Yep.
Okay. So you know, I think that's a good reflection. Let me go back one step. Whenever I ask that question, the overwhelming responses are yes to those questions. So if that's happening, pardon?
I've got 1 no for 3, I think.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. The challenge is, or what I'd like you to think about with that as well, if this is how you're feeling about conversations that you go into, then it's potentially the same for the people that you're in conversations with as well. So this is why it's really important to be able to say, well, okay, we're thinking about communication, we're thinking about wellness. How do we approach these for it's good to know all these things about them, but how do we approach this so that we can have better workplace relationships, how we can retain staff and customers, and overall have good relationships? So that's what we're going to look at now. So in selling, they say people buy from people they like. If you think about that from your own perspective and the things that you're buying, the services that services and products, then I would imagine that most of us would agree that unless there is no other provider, then we tend to go to the companies and the businesses that we like the most. We can apply the same principle to why people are happy to be a part of your team as well, because we're all selling. You know, when I was first introduced to this whole concept of selling a long time ago, I used to proudly say, I don't sell anything. And then, of course, I realized that we're always selling. When we're having a conversation with someone and we want them to embrace an idea that we have, then we're selling an idea to them. We're selling to our families all the time, to children, to get them to eat the food we want them to eat, to do the things that we want them to do. So in the workplace, we're always selling as team leaders, as managers, as business owners, as bosses. Well, let's go to leaders, not bosses, because leaders lead and bosses tend to dictate much more than lead by example. We have we're always selling something. So be conscious of the fact that if you're wanting to get an idea across to someone, or for them to embrace and move with you side by side with a strategy, it's all about them wanting to be on board and essentially buying into what it is that you want them to do. So that probably says it all. We talk about people buying into an idea. Well, where does that come from? It comes from the fact that we're selling an idea. So how we show up influences others, whether we're assertive, submissive, or aggressive, how well we know ourselves, how prepared we are, and how engaged and present we are. So, of course, if we go back to the first one, we want to be working on being assertive as much as possible, because assertive shows that both of our opinions are important. When we're being submissive, what we're saying is that the other person matters more than we do. And so what they're saying is we tend to be agreeing much more with them. We're putting our own thoughts and perspectives in the background. And when we're being aggressive, it's all about us. It's all about my opinion is the most important. I'm the most important person in the room. You will listen to what I'm saying. You will do what I want you to do. Whereas assertive is very much about how can we work together? So, you know, think about it as when we're being assertive, we tend to talk in terms of what can we do? When we're being submissive, it's all about what do you want? And when we're being aggressive, it's all about what I want. Knowing ourselves, of course, comes back to being aware of how you operate, maybe where your strengths and weaknesses are in how you communicate. going into a meeting or a situation, being aware of where you may not feel so confident. Being prepared is about going into any meeting or situation, obviously knowing what you want the outcome to be. And being engaged and present, well, that's being in the room. That's being in that conversation, regardless of anything else. Now, I clicked ahead a minute ago. Sorry about that. But the whole thing that we're talking about with how we show up and influencing others is that staff retention and customer retention are both equally affected by how we show up. So retaining staff, of course, is about having people wanting to work with you and for you. And customer retention is about having customers wanting to stay, having a reason to stay. So when they feel that they are dealing with someone who is showing up in a professional and respectful way, then in both situations, we're much more likely to retain. So what do we do when things are challenging? Because that's something that we haven't really covered. I touched on it a little bit in the diagram about feeling in charge of the excitement cycle. When it's challenging, the most important thing is that we're recognizing that we've got emotions plus a situation, issue, or discussion that we're dealing with. And those two things together, the emotions and the situation, require empathy and understanding. So when we go into any challenging situation, knowing that we need to understand the other person or the situation, that combination of both, and we need to use empathy, it makes it much easier to be able to work to resolving a challenge. And by challenge, I'm talking about, it might be someone who is unhappy about a product or service, or from a staff point of view, unhappy about either a task they've been given or something that's happening in the workplace. All of them, bring them right back to basics. They all require empathy and understanding as the first thing. And that is related to the person, not the situation. So one of the first things that we need to do if we're dealing with a challenging situation is get some clarity. And we often ask the question, what do you mean? The challenge with the question, what do you mean, is it can often be a bit confronting, whereas a softer, more embracing question, which is saying, look, I need some more clarity, then we're better off asking the question, how do you mean? Trial that yourselves and you'll be able to see what the difference is. It will become much clearer when you're actually putting it into practice. And that's why I say trial it as opposed to try it. So we get some clarity around what it is that someone is talking to us about. For example, a workplace situation that's evolving between two staff that are just not getting on very well together. So you get some clarity around that situation and how it's happening. It might be that the person is feeling quite disrespected by the way the other person is talking to them. So when we engage with empathy, we want to go down the track of understanding why someone would be feeling the way that they're feeling, as opposed to saying, I know how you feel. When we say, I know how you feel, it's very easy for someone to come straight back and say, how would you know how I feel? You're not in my shoes. You don't know what my life is like. Whereas when we say, I can understand why you'd be feeling that way, what we're talking about is putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and understanding why it would be if you had the same thing said to you, or you were in the same situation, you can get an understanding about how it would impact them, because you can understand how it would impact you, if that makes sense. So we've got a bit more clarity. We've gone down the track of saying, I can understand why you'd be feeling that way. To continue with that conversation, we need to make sure that we're using empathy and we're continually clarifying what it is that someone is saying to us. Because if we don't have that clarity, then what's happening is that we're not able to really get an understanding of what it is that the other person is talking to us about, or more importantly, we don't have the same ability to be able to work to a solution or resolution. Okay, so what happens when our staff or customers believe they can't speak up or they just don't feel heard? Well, there's really three things that can happen here. One is some will just leave. So you have a situation in your team where a staff member just says, you know what, I'm not getting through, I'm not being heard, my opinion doesn't matter, it's too hard, I'm too stressed, I'll just leave. The second thing is that some people will move past the situation. They might just be able to say, you know what, I'll put it in perspective. It doesn't matter. I'm here at the moment. I don't want to go anywhere else. I'll just deal with it. It's just much easier to do. I'm not going to get stressed about something that I really can't do anything about at the moment. And of course, the third situation is that some will want to leave, yet they stay because of a range of circumstances. Now, going back a number of years, probably before I had as much experience in workplaces and before I became a mum as well, and circumstances and life responsibilities changed. I used to hear HR managers saying, oh, look, if they don't like it, they can leave. And, you know, my clients would say, oh, if they don't like it, they can leave. And I used to think, yeah, okay, well, maybe, you know, maybe that's true. Maybe if someone is being paid more than they would normally be paid, or they've got lots of recognition financially for the role that they're doing, well, then yeah, maybe that's the case. I then came to realise a lot of years later, and I guess a lot of life experience later, that some people might want to leave, and yet they have to stay because at the very least they might not be able to find another job to go to, and they need financial stability. The other thing that can happen though is that if someone is in a work situation, and I'll talk about staff predominantly at the moment, when someone is in a work situation where they don't feel that they have a voice, they don't know who to turn to, they don't feel heard, and their self-esteem has been quite eroded by situations and challenges that have been happening at work, whether it's to do with customers or to do with staff or colleagues. What can happen is that person might want to leave, yet they really feel very stuck. And the danger of having people in your team that are in that place, in that headspace, or even if that's yourself, the challenge of that is that when this is managed poorly, it can have a wide-ranging impact. It can lead to toxic work environments. It can lead to instability within a team, particularly when the person has a strong influence on other people. They may, it may even be that the person who needs to leave the most is one that nobody's having a conversation with about their behaviour because it's too challenging or because they're not hearing. So something I want to mention here is that the thing about dealing with customers as well, it's a similar situation. If your customers or clients don't feel that they can leave because they have nowhere else to go, they can also create really challenging environments to work with as well, and challenging situations, because they're only really staying because they have to. And so it's being able to be aware of this as a possibility is something that hopefully keeps you on alert, that it's really important to look at what people are saying, how people are responding, and how we're doing things, because every conversation, every email, every contact can be having an influence on the staff, on staff and customers alike. So let's have a look at how we bring all this together. A couple of things with that is that if we think about what we're dealing with in our workplaces and in our businesses, if we don't take time to get our communication right and create healthy workplaces and healthy environments where people want to stay and customers want to engage with us and want to use our services and buy our products, then we're going to have to, by default, make time to resolve the situations that aren't working, to sort out staff issues that are creating productivity challenges or creating workplace communication issues affecting other team members, to sort out customer or client issues. Though it's either going to be time up front where we work out how we engage properly and how we get things right, or as right as we can, and work on the small challenges that come up, which keep us on our toes and keep us directing our businesses, our organisations moving forward, or we have that chunk of time where we are fighting fires, problem solving, and in some cases dealing with really serious issues that have been let go because no one wanted the uncomfortableness of confronting the situations while they were small. So that's something that's really important to remember. The other thing that's really important is that we now, for the first time in history, we have 5 generations in our workplace. And that's going back before the baby boomers. And within a couple of years, we're going to have, I think it's going to be 75% of the workforce will be just forgotten the last 3 generations, the Gen Zers, the millennials, and the Gen Xers. The baby boomers will essentially be out of the workplace, or else will be adapting to working under this new generation of bosses. So it's really important for us to be able to look at what we're doing and be able to say, well, okay, I might not share some of these views about the flexibility of working from home, for example, which is one of the things that's been quite topical since the pandemic. However, this is a reality that in our younger generations, they're looking for different things. And so, you know, in every generation, there are people that are very driven, that are very focused on work, that are very, very, very much wanting to get ahead, do a great job, create great businesses, create great workplaces, and do good work for their organisations, whichever level that they're in. So our challenge is being able to say, how can I respond and respect what other people want in the workplace? And just because it's different for me doesn't mean it's a bad thing. A good example of that is that our newer generations, our younger generations, don't want to do the frog in the pot type of work that the baby boomers did, where the more pressure that was added, the more was accepted. We've got people coming through now that are saying, hey, I'm not going to work myself into the ground. I want more balance. So, and of course, that's reflected in our the way that we're seeing wellness policies and things like that coming into the workplace too. So I'll come back to that in a moment, because I want to address these 7 keys. So the first key is, whatever you're doing, be your best self. Turn up to be the best that you possibly can be, and aim at that as a starting point of everything. Because when you want to lead from the front, the first person that you need to look after is you. Because when you look after you, to be your best self, you will show up for everybody else in that way as well. Number 2, make sure you feel in charge. Now, I touched on this before. Feeling in charge is different than being in charge, because you can't always be fully in control of anything. Feeling in charge means that even amidst the greatest amount of chaos, be it to do with your in the workplace, or to do with customers, or outside of work, Feeling in charge is about being able to say, I can handle what's going on. Number 3, communicate clearly. Make sure that you're listening and hearing exactly what it is that the other person is saying to you, and make sure that what you're saying is being understood by the people that you're talking to. And if not, then check in. No, we see the body language signs when someone looks confused or hasn't heard what we've said. Read them and act on them in a positive way. Engage with empathy and understanding. Now, when I talked about me-based and you-based communication earlier, and I talked about focusing on the person first and putting the effort into greeting and how are you to build that relationship and show respect. What I didn't say is that this isn't about the amount of time that you put into the first part of conversations. It's not about the time that you put into showing empathy. It's about the effort that you put into it. And I'm a great believer that when you put the effort in up front, then you'll end up with the result as you're coming toward the close. You'll have a much better relationship with the person or people that you're speaking to when you engage with them up front and put that effort into having and showing mutual respect. So be solution focused. So obviously, whenever we're looking at how we're interacting with other people, it's really important to focus on solutions. We can all see where the issues are, and we can all bring up, that's not right, or that's not right, and that's all wrong, and why would you think that? The challenge is that can take us a long way away from finding a solution. Be solution focused, have conversations that are solution focused. And when you're having those conversations, work to understanding what's happened in the past and work to what the outcome is that you want in the future. So, for example, having a conversation with a staff member where their productivity may have faltered or not be as high as it needs to be, certainly explore that situation, be clear on what's happening, and then work to a solution. Too many times what happens is that we have conversations both with customers that may not have done the right thing. For example, a customer who is not paying their bills on time or is just being quite negative and is very disgruntled about the services that we're offering. Focusing on what they haven't done correctly doesn't necessarily always get you to the solution. What it does is it puts the focus on everything that's gone wrong. And that brings me to number 6, which is focus on being kind, not right. Now, this comes from someone who I have a great respect for. His name is Wayne Dyer. You may know him. He wrote a book called Your Erroneous Zones, and he's done a lot of work over the years in personal and professional development. And this is one of his things. And when I heard it the first time, I thought, yeah, okay, let's see what that really means. The thing about being kind instead of right means that you go into a conversation fully respectful of the other person, knowing that when you see an issue or something that's gone wrong, let's say, again, poor work productivity. When you're talking to someone about their work productivity, they probably know as well as you do that their productivity isn't up to scratch. So being right means that you focus on that lack of productivity. Being kind means that you look at how it can be improved, or you acknowledge what's being done right to then get to being able to fix what's not being done so well. So being kind can change a conversation. It can be quite challenging to do. However, the beautiful thing about it, when you get used to doing it, is you'll see that by being kind and not honing in on everything that's wrong, being kind leads the other person to feel more comfortable having a conversation about what needs to be improved, or leads you more to getting things fixed that haven't been going the way that you want. Number seven is have a plan whilst being flexible. One of the things I learnt a number of years ago from one of my clients was that I remember sitting in a meeting and I was feeling really pressured about needing to have all of the answers. And then I sat and I had this moment where I relaxed and I thought to myself, if I just listen to what the other person is telling me, they will guide me to what my answers need to be, what my solutions are going to be. And that was a real turning point in lots of things, because often we put so much pressure on ourselves to get things right, to have all of the answers, to come up with all of the solutions. And when we put that pressure on ourselves, we become inflexible, we stop listening, and we don't give ourselves the opportunity to be the best that we can be. So bringing that all together, how can you achieve this? What are some of the things that you can do to be able to drive a customer focused culture? And I'm talking about internal customers and external customers. Part of that may mean having an action plan. So a sample action plan can be as simple as this. You define what is that you want to achieve, start off with something small and decide on 7 simple steps to be able to achieve it. So, okay, we're coming to the end, and I'm closing in on only having a few minutes for questions at the moment. Just one thing is, if today is yesterday's tomorrow, what's the one thing that you would like to do better starting today? And how would you be able to do that? Now, when we had the poll before, the overwhelming responses to the questions I asked showed that really the challenge can be being heard, being understood, and being able to say what it is that we want to say. So maybe that's one of the things to have a look at for being able to do better starting today. The important thing is that whenever we're going through making any changes, getting from where we want to be getting from where we are to where we want to be, there's tension there. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because anything that we do that differently is good. We have lots of tipping points, and there's going to be times where we have knockbacks and courage, and we need the courage to seek out the uncomfortable and say, because this doesn't feel good, doesn't feel comfortable, means that I'm actually changing and learning. So in the final words of Eleanor Roosevelt, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift, that's why we call it the present. Or as Wayne Dyer says, the past is the wake that we leave behind. If you think of a boat, and the only thing that's going to drive us forward is the energy and the engagement that we have in the present moment. So think about that, learn from the past, and go into any conversations that you're having engaged and present in the moment, and be able to reflect, to move forward, go into each conversation fresh, and look after yourself to be the best you as well. And that's how we can retain our staff more and retain our customers as well. Thank you.